My mother-in-law gave iPads, jewelry, and money to the grandkids, except to my daughter. She said, she is not really part of the family. My husband said nothing. Then my 7-year-old daughter pushed a small box across the table and said, "Grandma, Dad told me to give you this if you ignored me again." She opened it, and screamed. Rachel stood in front of the full-length mirror in her modest Connecticut home, adjusting the pink bow in Lily's hair for the third time. The little girl, only 7 years old, looked up with a hopeful grin, clutching a handmade birthday card adorned with stickers and glitter. "Do you think Grandma will like it?" she asked. Rachel swallowed hard and smiled. "She'll love it," she lied. The truth was, Rachel had spent the morning pushing down a growing sense of unease. Over the years, Barbara's birthday gatherings had become increasingly extravagant, staged productions with gourmet catering, live music, and carefully curated guest lists. But it wasn't the luxury that unnerved Rachel. It was the unspoken divide. From the beginning, she had sensed something different in the way Barbara treated Lily compared to the other grandchildren. A polite distance. A cold smile. A tendency to overlook her daughter in every way that mattered. Still, Rachel hoped things would be different this time. They arrived at the estate shortly after noon. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, and the scent of hydrangeas wafted through the late summer air. Rachel took Lily's hand and walked up the steps to the grand colonial home where David had grown up, where Rachel had never quite felt welcome. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Barbara, immaculately dressed in a navy silk blouse and diamond earrings, stood at the center of it all, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. David's sisters were already there with their families, and the living room table was piled high with brightly wrapped gifts. Rachel exchanged polite greetings, trying not to notice how Barbara barely acknowledged her presence. Instead, her focus was on the children, her real grandchildren, as Rachel had come to suspect she thought of them. Come in," Barbara said with forced cheer. "The children can open their presents before lunch." The kids gathered around the table. Lily, ever so patient, stood quietly between her cousins, Emma, 12, Caleb, 10, and Ava, 9, all dressed in designer clothes, their hands twitching with excitement. One by one, Barbara handed out the gifts. Emma squealed when she unwrapped a new iPad. Caleb received a gold necklace engraved with his initials. Ava clapped her hands over her mouth when she opened an envelope filled with crisp $100 bills. Rachel watched Lily's face, first glowing with anticipation, then gradually dimming with confusion. Barbara turned to sit down, clearly done. There was no box left. No bag. Nothing for Lily. Rachel's heart pounded. She waited a moment, hoping it was an oversight. Then she forced a chuckle. "I think someone's gift might be hiding," she said lightly, scanning the table. Barbara looked up, her expression cool. "There's nothing missing," she said flatly. Rachel blinked, unsure how to respond. Around them, the other adults shifted uncomfortably. The children sensed something was off, but only Lily, small and silent, stood still, her card still in her hands, unopened, glitter flaking off. David, who had been pouring himself a drink in the corner, glanced over but said nothing. Rachel bent down to Lily's level. "It's okay, sweetheart. Maybe Grandma just forgot." Lily looked up, her lower lip trembling. "But I made her something." "Go ahead and give it to her," Rachel said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Lily approached the table, her small shoes tapping gently on the hardwood floor. She extended the card toward her grandmother with both hands. "Happy birthday, Grandma." Barbara took the card, glanced at it briefly, then placed it on the table without a word. No smile. No thank you. Rachel could barely breathe. The air in the room felt tight, heavy. Lily returned to her seat, eyes downcast. Rachel reached for her daughter's hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. She looked at David again, willing him to say something, anything. But he avoided her gaze, sipping his drink like nothing had happened. Just then, Barbara stood up, holding her champagne glass aloft. To family, she announced. The ones who matter most. A shallow chorus of cheers followed, but Rachel didn't join in. Her ears rang with silence. Her pulse thudded in her neck. Then, as if on cue, Barbara turned her eyes toward Lily. Cold, distant, unapologetic. She is not really part of the family, she said. The words dropped like a bomb. The room froze. Lily's eyes widened. Rachel's hand gripped hers so tightly that her own knuckles turned white. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Rachel stood, slowly, her heart slamming against her ribs. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Barbara didn't flinch. "I said what everyone already knows." Rachel scanned the room. Her sister-in-law looked away. David's father cleared his throat and stepped back. David, her husband, the man who was supposed to protect their daughter, looked down into his glass. "David," Rachel said, her voice breaking, "are you going to let her say that?" Still, he said nothing. Rachel's vision blurred. She turned back to Lily, who whispered, "What does that mean, Mommy?" Rachel crouched beside her daughter, holding her close. "It means Grandma doesn't understand what love is," she whispered. "But we do." The party went on around them, a hollow celebration that felt like an insult. Rachel wanted to scream, to cry, to pull her daughter out of that house and never look back. But then something unexpected happened. Lily stood up. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a pink-wrapped object, a small box, no bigger than her hand. Without a word, she walked to the table where Barbara sat. And with both hands, she pushed the box across the surface, slowly, deliberately. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Grandma," Lily said in a clear, steady voice, "Dad told me to give you this if you ignored me again." Everyone turned. Barbara stared at the box. Rachel froze. David looked up. And for the first time all afternoon, silence truly fell. Barbara's fingers hovered above the pink-wrapped box as though it were something contaminated. The entire room remained frozen, a still life of held breaths and wide eyes. Rachel didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the box, her ears burning with the echo of Lily's words. "Dad told me to give you this if you ignored me again." The implications trembled beneath the surface. Rachel could feel it, something was about to crack wide open. Barbara finally reached out. She tore off the wrapping in two impatient motions, revealing a simple cardboard box with a loose lid. She lifted it slowly, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. What she saw inside made her recoil as if struck. A strangled sound escaped her lips before she let out a piercing scream. She flung the box away from her with such force that it hit the floor and spun beneath the table. Rachel jolted. Lily shrank back instinctively, and someone gasped audibly. The room erupted into chaos, chairs scraped back, voices murmured, a glass shattered on the floor. But Rachel only saw the box and what had slipped out of it, a photograph, face up, glowing with the past. She rushed forward, picking it up. It was David. Younger, maybe in his early 20s. He was seated on a hospital bench, smiling nervously, holding a newborn baby. A woman with red hair, not Rachel, stood beside him. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder, and her eyes were fixed on the child. The baby's features were unmistakable. It was Lily. Rachel's stomach turned. Her hand tightened around the photo. She didn't need to ask. She had never seen this picture before, but she knew instantly what it was. She turned to David. He was pale, ashen, his mouth slightly open. "Rachel," he started, but nothing else came out. "Not here," Rachel said, her voice low and dangerous. "We're leaving. Now." She didn't look at Barbara again. She didn't look at anyone. She grabbed Lily's hand, stuffed the photo in her bag, and walked out of the room. The air outside was humid, but Rachel breathed it in like it was the first clean breath she'd had in years. Lily clutched her hand tightly as they walked to the car in silence. David followed behind them, hesitant, unsure whether he should even speak. Once inside the car, Rachel buckled Lily in, kissed her on the forehead, then turned to David, who was standing outside the driver's side. "Drive," she said. "And start talking. All of it." The ride home was silent. Lily, sensing the heaviness in the air, leaned against the window, her small face thoughtful. Rachel stared straight ahead. David's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Once home, Rachel sent Lily upstairs with a book and told her to stay in her room. When she returned to the living room, David was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor. She stood across from him, arms crossed. "You have 2 minutes before I walk out of this house." David looked up. His voice was thin. "It was before you and I got married. During that break. We weren't really talking. You had moved back to Boston, and I didn't know where we stood." Rachel said nothing. "I met someone," he continued. "Her name was Sarah. It was quick. A few weeks. I never even told you about it because, honestly, I didn't think it would matter. Then she disappeared. Months later, she came back. With Lily." Rachel felt like the floor beneath her was shifting. "You knew from the start she was your daughter?" David nodded. "She did a test. She didn't want anything from me. She said she wasn't ready to be a mom and she didn't have support. I didn't want to lose Lily. I couldn't. When you and I got back together, I thought I could handle it. We could raise her. Together. As our own. You loved her. You still do. Did you ever think I had the right to know?" Rachel asked, her voice rising. "That I might have made a different choice if you'd been honest with me?" "I thought I was protecting you," he said weakly. "Protecting us?" "No," Rachel snapped. "You were protecting yourself. And now Lily, our daughter, had to sit there and be told she's not part of the family. Because your mother knew, didn't she?" David didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rachel turned away, blinking back tears. "So all these years she's been treating Lily like an outsider because she knew she wasn't mine. And you let it happen." "I didn't think she'd ever say it out loud," David whispered. "That's what you were hoping for?" Silence? Rachel's voice cracked. "You were hoping everyone would just keep pretending? Even if it crushed our daughter in the process?" David buried his face in his hands. Rachel stood frozen for a long moment. Then she walked away, not to punish, not to avoid, but to think. Her hands were shaking. Her thoughts were a storm. Upstairs, Lily was still awake. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. "Did I do something wrong?" Lily asked, her voice barely audible. Rachel felt her heart splinter. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. You were very brave today." "But why did Grandma say that?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She brushed Lily's hair back and kissed her forehead again. "Some people are mean because they're afraid of what they don't understand. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means they're broken. Is Dad mad at me?" Rachel sighed. "No. He's not mad. He's just confused." Lily seemed to accept that, though the worry didn't quite leave her eyes. "Can I sleep with the nightlight on?" "Of course," Rachel whispered. Later that night, after Lily had drifted to sleep, Rachel sat in the hallway outside her daughter's room, holding the photograph. She turned it over. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, "Her name is Lily. Please take care of her." Her fingers trembled. Downstairs, David was still sitting in the dark, waiting for the punishment he knew was coming. Rachel didn't speak to him again that night. She couldn't. But in her heart, something was already forming, not just anger or grief, but resolve. She would find out everything. She would uncover every layer of truth, no matter how painful. Because Lily deserved more than secrets and silence. She deserved to know who she was. And she deserved to be loved without condition. the morning after Barbara's party came in slow waves of silence. Rachel woke early, not because she had slept well, but because her mind wouldn't let her rest. Downstairs, the coffee maker sputtered to life, but she didn't touch it. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the trees sway in the September breeze, her thoughts circling back to Lily's small hands pushing that box across the table. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just calm determination, a child's voice delivering a line heavy with consequence. Rachel didn't know what terrified her more, the box itself, or the knowledge that David had prepared their daughter for that moment in advance. He knew. He expected this. And instead of confronting it himself, he placed the burden into Lily's hands. Lily came down the stairs in her pajamas, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. She rubbed her eyes sleepily and walked to the table without saying a word. Rachel joined her with a bowl of cereal and a quiet kiss on the head. Neither spoke for several minutes. Then Lily asked, "Are we going back to Grandma's house next week?" Rachel's chest tightened. "No, sweetie. I don't think we'll be going back there for a while." Lily nodded slowly. "She didn't like my gift." Rachel leaned closer. "She didn't deserve your gift. And that has nothing to do with you. What you did was very kind. And very brave." Lily chewed in silence. Then, in the same quiet tone, she said, "She got scared when she saw the picture." Rachel paused. "Did you know what was in the box?" Lily shrugged. "Dad said it was a secret. He just said to give it to her if she pretended I wasn't there again." Rachel sat back. The weight of David's silence returned, cold and deliberate. He had known exactly what might happen, and instead of facing it himself, he turned his daughter into a messenger. It wasn't just cowardice. It was betrayal. David appeared in the doorway then, looking like he hadn't slept at all. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He stepped into the room cautiously, as though testing the air. Rachel stood and met his gaze. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. "Yeah," he answered, nodding toward the back porch. "Let's go outside." Rachel followed him out. They stood in the morning light, surrounded by the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional bird call. She crossed her arms, not from the chill, but from the need to anchor herself. "You knew this was going to happen," she said. "That's why you gave Lily the box." "I didn't know," he replied quickly. "I thought, maybe it wouldn't come to that." "But you planned for it." David ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to blindside her. I wanted her to have a way to defend herself. If I said something, it would have turned into a war. But if Lily did it, maybe they'd listen differently." Rachel stared at him, stunned. "You used her. You made a child do what you were too afraid to do." "I wasn't trying to hurt her," he said, his voice low. "But you did," Rachel snapped. "You let your mother humiliate her, and then you turned Lily into a pawn in a game you created. All to avoid a confrontation you should have had years ago." David looked away. "You think I don't regret it?" "I don't care about your regret right now," she said. "I care about what happens next. I want everything. The whole story. No more secrets. No more pieces of truth hidden in boxes." David hesitated, then finally nodded. "Come with me." They walked back inside, and David led her to his office. It was a room Rachel rarely entered, lined with law books, case files, and the distinct air of privacy. He opened the bottom drawer of a locked cabinet and pulled out an old folder, worn around the edges. "This is everything," he said, placing it on the desk. Rachel opened it slowly. Inside were neatly stacked documents, emails, printed texts, a notarized agreement, and an envelope that appeared to contain a birth certificate. She flipped through the pages, each one pulling her deeper into a history she hadn't known existed. There was a series of email exchanges between David and Sarah, dating back to the year before their wedding. In them, Sarah confirmed her pregnancy and stated clearly that she did not wish to raise the child. David's responses were emotional, desperate, pleading with her to reconsider or at least allow him to be part of the child's life. In one message, he wrote, "If you won't be her mother, I will find a way to raise her safely, with or without you." Further down, Rachel found a typed agreement, signed and dated, relinquishing parental rights. It wasn't a formal court document, just an informal understanding, witnessed and notarized. She left the state not long after, David explained. She didn't want contact. "I tried to reach her once after Lily turned 2, just to send pictures, but the email bounced back. I figured she had moved on." Rachel kept reading. The last page in the stack was a faded photograph, another shot of David with the newborn Lily, taken from a different angle. Behind them stood Barbara. Rachel stared at it, her heart sinking. She knew? David nodded. "I told her everything before I brought Lily home. I was scared. I needed someone to help me figure out what to do. I didn't expect her to react like that." "And yet you let her stay in Lily's life," Rachel said bitterly. "She's my mother." "She's not Lily's," Rachel snapped. "Not after yesterday. Not ever again." David didn't respond. Rachel carefully placed the documents back into the folder. "You said you didn't try to contact Sarah again. But I think it's time I did." David's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because I need to hear from her what you clearly can't explain," Rachel replied. "And because Lily deserves the truth, the whole truth. And I can't give that to her without Sarah." David hesitated, then quietly said, "There's an old email address in there. I don't know if it still works." Rachel took the note and turned toward the door. She paused, her hand on the frame. "You might have made peace with your lies. But I haven't." Later that evening, once Lily was asleep again, Rachel sat down at her laptop. She stared at the blank email for a long time before typing. Subject: about Lily. Message: "You don't know me. But I'm Rachel, David's wife. I believe we need to talk. It's about Lily. If this reaches you, please reply. I don't want anything from you, except the truth." She hesitated only a second before clicking send. Then she closed the laptop and walked to her daughter's room. She stood there in the doorway, watching her sleep, wondering what would come next. The next morning came thick with tension. Rachel awoke early, her thoughts looping between the unanswered email she had sent and the growing distance between her and David. She had barely spoken to him since their conversation in the office. He hadn't tried to follow her when she left the room that night, nor had he knocked on the bedroom door. There was no fight, no plea, no attempt to explain himself further. Only silence. Lily's footsteps echoed lightly on the hardwood floor upstairs. Rachel listened for a moment, letting the sound ground her. She needed to remain steady, not just for herself, but for the little girl who was beginning to sense the cracks in her world. At breakfast, Lily was unusually quiet. She pushed her eggs around her plate and avoided eye contact. Rachel tried to keep things light, talking about a book Lily was reading in school, a field trip coming up, the changing leaves outside. None of it landed. Then, as Rachel collected the dishes, Lily finally said, "Is Daddy mad at me?" Rachel turned slowly, setting the plates down. "No, honey. He's not mad. None of this is your fault." Lily's brow furrowed. "But everything feels weird." Rachel came over and crouched beside her. "It's because something unfair happened, and now we're trying to make it right. But grown-ups sometimes forget how to fix things the right way." Lily nodded, her expression solemn. "Grandma doesn't like me. I know it." Rachel didn't answer. She just wrapped her arms around Lily and held her close. Later that day, after Rachel dropped Lily off at school, she sat in her car outside the elementary building, staring at her phone. She opened her email app for what felt like the 100th time that morning. Nothing. No reply from Sarah. She sighed and was about to put the phone away when, at the last second, a notification popped up. One new message. Her heart leapt as she opened it. From sarah.m.james@gmail.com. Subject, about Lily. Message. Rachel. I never thought I'd hear from anyone again. I can't believe you reached out. I think about Lily every day. I have things I need to say, things David probably never told you. Can we meet? Rachel's hands trembled. She typed back quickly, setting a time and place for the next afternoon, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes. As she hit send, the fear settled in. It wasn't just about Sarah's return, it was the weight of the story she might bring with her. And what it might confirm. That evening, Rachel told David she was going out the next day. She didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. He simply nodded and said, "Do what you need to do." And then he turned back to the television. By the time Rachel arrived at the cafe the following afternoon, her nerves were frayed. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a young couple by the window and an older man reading a newspaper in the corner. She chose a booth near the back and ordered coffee. She didn't have to wait long. Sarah walked in wearing jeans, a navy sweater, and a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked older than in the photo, older than Rachel had imagined, but there was something soft about her presence, something tired and weathered, like a woman who had lived several lifetimes inside just one. They locked eyes. Sarah approached slowly and sat across from her. "I wasn't sure if you'd really come," Rachel said. "I almost didn't," Sarah replied. "But I'm glad I did." There was an awkward silence. Then Rachel leaned in slightly. "I know some of the story. David told me pieces. But I don't think I know the truth." Sarah nodded. "You deserve it." She pulled a small envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. "There's a letter in there I wrote years ago. I gave it to David, told him to give it to Lily when she was older. But I knew he never would." Rachel didn't touch the envelope yet. "I loved her," Sarah began. "But I was 23, broke, living with roommates in Brooklyn, and barely holding a job. I was terrified. David seemed like he had his life together. He had a family. Stability. He promised me he'd raise her well. I believed him." "Did Barbara know about you?" Rachel asked. Sarah's face darkened. "She didn't just know. She came to see me. Once. She offered me money to stay away. Said Lily would be better off without confusion." Rachel's stomach dropped. "How much?" $5,000, Sarah said. "I didn't take it. But the message was clear. I was never going to be part of Lily's life. So I stepped back." Rachel was silent, her mind swimming with the revelation. She thought about Barbara's cold glare, the way she dismissed Lily with just a sentence. This wasn't just passive rejection, it was premeditated. "Do you want to be in her life now?" Rachel asked cautiously. Sarah hesitated. "I don't know. I don't want to confuse her. But if she ever wants to meet me, I'd be here in a heartbeat." Rachel finally picked up the envelope. It was sealed with a piece of tape and lightly worn from years of handling. She slipped it into her bag. "I'll decide when it's time to share this with her." Sarah nodded. "That's fair." They sat in silence for a few more moments before Sarah stood. "Thank you for meeting me. And thank you for raising her." Rachel rose too. "She's extraordinary. You gave birth to her, but I get to watch her grow." Sarah smiled, eyes misty. "Then she's lucky to have both of us, in our own ways." Rachel watched her leave, then sat back down, overwhelmed. When she got home later that evening, David was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He looked up as she entered but didn't speak. Rachel placed her purse down and walked toward him. "I met Sarah," she said plainly. David froze. "What did she say?" "She told me the truth," Rachel answered. "Things you should have told me years ago." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how. She said your mother tried to buy her silence." David closed his eyes. "I know. Rachel crossed her arms. And you still let her be around Lily all these years? Knowing what she did? I thought if I kept the peace, it would get better. Well, it didn't, Rachel said coldly. It got worse. And it broke something in all of us. Before David could reply, they heard a noise from upstairs. A loud thud. Followed by silence. Then, a piercing scream. Rachel bolted from the kitchen, David close behind. They rushed up the stairs and into Lily's room, where she stood in the corner, pale and shaking. What happened? Rachel asked, dropping to her knees. Lily pointed at the window. There was a woman, she whispered. She was looking at me through the glass. Rachel looked toward the window, it was open slightly. The screen intact. But there was no one outside now, only the rustling of the trees. David ran downstairs and out the front door, scanning the street. Nothing. Back upstairs, Rachel pulled Lily into her arms. It's okay, baby, she murmured, even as her own heart pounded. You're safe. I've got you. But in her gut, Rachel knew this wasn't nothing. Something, or someone, was watching. And things were about to get worse. That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, her body curled under 3 blankets and a nightlight glowing beside her, Rachel sat at the kitchen table in silence. The scream from earlier still echoed in her ears. She had checked every window, every door. David had walked the perimeter twice. Nothing. No sign of the woman Lily claimed to have seen. But Rachel knew her daughter. Lily was sensitive, yes, observant, cautious, but she never made things up. What she saw, she believed. And that alone was enough to make Rachel's blood run cold. David returned from the garage with a flashlight and a heavy-duty padlock. I'll put this on the backyard gate. Just in case. Rachel didn't look up. She was still staring at the photo Sarah had given her, the one with David, Barbara, and the newborn Lily in the hospital. She had been studying it all evening, trying to decipher the expressions, the positioning, the energy between the 3 of them. David looked young and nervous. Barbara, stiff and grim, held her purse with both hands and stood just far enough away to make a statement. It wasn't love. It wasn't pride. It was something else entirely. Disgust, maybe. Or disapproval frozen into civility. Was your mother ever affectionate with Lily when she was a baby? Rachel asked suddenly. David set the flashlight down. Not really. She always said she didn't want to interfere too much in our parenting. Rachel scoffed. That was never about parenting. It was about shame. David hesitated. You think she was embarrassed by her? I think she never wanted her here in the first place, Rachel said, pushing the photo away. Sarah told me your mother offered her money to vanish. David sat down across from her. I know. She told me, too. Years later. And you still brought Lily around her. To dinners. To birthdays. You let her sit at that table last week and watch her cousins open gifts while she got nothing. David exhaled. I thought if we acted like a normal family, she'd come around. She didn't. And she never will. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft tick of the wall clock. Rachel stood up. I need to know why your mother despises her. I don't mean the surface answer, the fact that Lily is Sarah's daughter. I mean the real reason. What started this? What does she think she's protecting your family from? David leaned back in the chair. You won't like it. Try me. He was quiet for a long time before answering. It goes back further than Lily. Before I met Sarah. When I was in college, I dated someone named Amanda. My mother adored her. She was the kind of girl Barbara wanted for her son, from a wealthy family, perfect etiquette, same country club crowd. We were together for almost 2 years. Everyone thought we'd get married. What happened? Rachel asked. She cheated on me, he said simply. With a guy in her lit class. I found out, broke it off, and moved on. But my mother never let it go. She blamed me, said I wasn't trying hard enough, that I let someone perfect slip through my fingers. After that, every woman I dated was a disappointment to her. Especially if they didn't come from her version of a respectable family. Rachel narrowed her eyes. So Sarah was unacceptable. She was a bartender, David said. Working her way through school. No rich parents. No pedigree. My mother hated her on sight. And me? She tolerated you, he admitted. Because you were quiet. Professional. Polished. Rachel didn't answer. The compliment, if it was one, landed flat. David leaned forward. The moment I told her Sarah was pregnant, she didn't even ask how I felt. She just said, "This is going to ruin everything." Not, "Are you ready?" Not, "What can I do?" Just that. Rachel felt a chill creep down her spine. So Lily was the stain she could never wash out. David nodded slowly. And when Sarah left, she saw an opportunity to erase the whole thing. She told me if I was serious about raising Lily, we'd have to do it quietly. No announcements. No drama. No explanations to the extended family. She said we'd just raise her like she was yours. Rachel's mouth twisted. So she wanted me to lie, too. She never asked you, David admitted. She just assumed I would handle it. Rachel pressed her hands to her face. How did I marry into this family and never see it? Because I kept it hidden, he said. And because you wanted peace. They sat in silence again. Then Rachel stood and walked to the living room bookshelf. She pulled down a box of old photo albums and opened one from the year Lily was born. She flipped through page after page, Lily's first steps, her first haircut, Christmas mornings, playground visits. Barbara appeared in only one photo, a Thanksgiving group shot, standing stiffly beside David, avoiding the child in his arms. Rachel closed the album. We let her grow up thinking she had a full family. We let her love people who never loved her back. David rubbed his eyes. I thought I was protecting her. No, Rachel said. You were protecting your mother's pride. Not our daughter. Later that night, after David had gone to bed, Rachel returned to the office. She opened the folder again, flipping through the paperwork with a new sense of urgency. Then she saw something she hadn't noticed before, a half-crumpled receipt tucked into the back of the folder, dated almost 7 years ago. It was from a small law office in Hartford. Rachel's curiosity piqued. The note on the back read, in Barbara's handwriting, "Follow up on inheritance clause." Rachel's eyes narrowed. She took out her laptop and typed the name of the law firm into a search engine. The office still existed. And they specialized in estate planning. Her breath caught. She wasn't ready to face the implications yet, but one thing was clear, Barbara's actions went beyond passive cruelty. This wasn't just coldness. It was calculated. Structured. Legal. And Lily had been the target from the beginning. The next morning, after dropping Lily at school, Rachel made a phone call. She scheduled a meeting with the firm for the following day, citing a possible conflict of interest with a family estate. The receptionist, polite but cautious, confirmed the appointment. When Rachel returned home, she found David sitting on the couch, holding a different photo in his hand, one of him holding Lily on her second birthday, frosting on her cheeks, eyes bright with joy. Rachel stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. There was guilt in his posture, but also something deeper, grief, maybe. Or helplessness. She deserves better than what we gave her, Rachel said softly. I know, he replied. Rachel sat beside him. Then help me fix this. No more secrets. No more shields. David turned to her. Whatever you need. I'm with you. For the first time in days, Rachel believed him. But deep down, she also knew this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what was coming. And she had a feeling Barbara was not finished. Rachel arrived 15 minutes early for her appointment at the Hartford law office. The firm was nestled in a modest brick building on a quiet street, unassuming from the outside but meticulously designed inside. Polished floors, fresh flowers in the reception area, soft classical music playing low. Everything smelled like leather and order. A young assistant greeted her, offering coffee, which she declined, then led her through a short hallway into a private meeting room with a wall of legal books and a large oak table at the center. A few moments later, a man in his late 50s entered, introducing himself as Charles Granger. He wore a navy suit, wire-framed glasses, and carried a leather folder under one arm. "Mrs. Sanders, thank you for coming in," he said, sitting across from her. "I understand you're inquiring about a potential family estate matter." Rachel clasped her hands in front of her. "Yes. I recently discovered a receipt from this office with my mother-in-law's name on it. Barbara Sanders. It was dated 7 years ago. I wanted to know if she has any active documents or trust accounts involving her estate that might affect my daughter." Charles's demeanor shifted subtly. He glanced down at the folder, then back at her. "I'll need to confirm your legal standing before we proceed. Are you a named party on any of the estate documents?" "I'm not sure," Rachel replied. "But I'm married to her son, David Sanders, and I have reason to believe my daughter, Lily, has been intentionally excluded from certain provisions." There was a long pause as Charles considered this. "I can't disclose specific details without authorization or court order," he said carefully. "But I can confirm that Barbara Sanders did revise her estate documents through our office. I was the one who handled the file." Rachel leaned forward. "Mr. Granger, my daughter has been mistreated by her grandmother in a way that has gone beyond personal bias. I believe there's been legal action taken to ensure she's excluded, not only emotionally, but financially and symbolically. If that's true, and it involves your office, I need to know." Charles removed his glasses and rubbed his temple. "Let me speak generally, and off the record. If a client requests changes to a will or trust, especially in a high-net-worth family, it's not uncommon for clauses to be included that reflect certain, let's say, family dynamics." "What kind of clauses?" Rachel asked. "Conditional inheritance," he replied. "Exclusions based on lineage, behavior, even associations. It's not illegal, though in some cases, it walks a moral tightrope." Rachel's jaw clenched. "So it's possible that Barbara created a will that names all her grandchildren, except mine?" "It is possible," he said. "And if she did, and you have reason to believe it was done with the intent to harm or discriminate against the child, you could challenge the document." Rachel nodded slowly. "Thank you." He stood. "If you pursue legal action, I'll cooperate with the court as required. But until then, I must respect attorney-client privilege." Rachel understood. She thanked him, left her contact information, and stepped out into the cool air with her pulse hammering in her ears. The truth was out there. It just needed the right pressure to come to light. Back at home, she found David sitting on the front steps, holding a manila folder of his own. He looked up as she approached. "I found something," he said. "In the storage unit." Rachel's heart skipped. "What is it?" He handed her the folder. "Old letters. From my mom. Stuff she wrote to her lawyer and never mailed. Drafts. They were in a box with some of my dad's financial records." Rachel opened it carefully. Inside were 4 handwritten letters on thick cream-colored paper, all addressed, to be reviewed by counsel. She scanned the first one, and her breath caught. It was a rough draft of a letter from Barbara to Charles Granger. In it, Barbara outlined her intent to ensure that any illegitimate descendants of David are excluded from the Sanders estate, citing concerns over genetic inheritance and family integrity. She described Lily only once, referring to her as the byproduct of a lapse in judgment, and expressed her fear that Rachel would eventually seek to manipulate inheritance law to benefit a child who was never ours. Rachel's hands trembled. "She wrote this?" David nodded. "There's more." The second letter was shorter, more direct. It outlined a plan to create a private trust that would distribute assets only to grandchildren who could prove direct maternal and paternal lineage to both Barbara and her late husband. There were legal terms peppered throughout, but the intent was unmistakable. Lily was to be cut out. The third letter referenced a family heirloom, a diamond necklace that had been in Barbara's possession for 3 generations, and instructions to pass it directly to Emma, her eldest granddaughter, to preserve its connection to the rightful bloodline. Rachel didn't finish the fourth. She was obsessed with purity, Rachel said, voice hollow. She saw Lily as a threat to the Sanders name. Like she wasn't even real. David looked ill. I didn't know about these. I swear. Rachel closed the folder. Well, now we both do. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Rachel called her friend Andrea, a civil attorney she trusted implicitly. They hadn't spoken in months, but Andrea's voice came through the line steady and warm. I need your help, Rachel said. It's about Lily. And my mother-in-law's estate. Over the next hour, Rachel explained everything, the party, the photo, Sarah, the documents, the visit to the law office, and now the letters. Andrea listened in silence until the end. You have enough to make a case, Andrea said. This isn't just a family feud. This could qualify as estate discrimination, possibly even defamation if the contents of those letters ever influence how your daughter is treated publicly or within private institutions. Would Lily have to be involved in the process? Rachel asked. Eventually, Andrea said gently. But for now, you can file on her behalf. Rachel agreed to meet with Andrea later that week. The call ended, but the weight of what she had set in motion lingered. She stepped into Lily's room and stood in the doorway for a long moment. Her daughter slept with one arm around her stuffed rabbit, her lips slightly parted. Rachel walked in and gently tucked the blanket higher under Lily's chin. You are ours, she whispered. In every way that matters. And no one will take that from you. Downstairs, David was reviewing the letters again, as if rereading them might offer some understanding of the woman who raised him. He looked up when Rachel entered the room. I want to speak to your sisters, she said. They have a right to know what's been happening. I doubt they'll believe it, David said. She always treated them differently. Like they were the heirs to some throne. Then let's show them the letters. Rachel sat down. The more people who know, the harder it will be for her to bury this. There was a long pause before David finally asked, do you think she'll fight back? Rachel met his gaze. She already has. For years. We just didn't see it. The letter came 2 days later, delivered not by a courier or through an official envelope, but folded neatly inside a plain white package placed in Rachel's mailbox. There was no return address, only Lily's name written in soft cursive on the outside, as though the sender had meant it to feel personal, intimate, even. Rachel recognized the handwriting immediately. She had seen it on the envelope Sarah had handed her at the cafe. But this one was different. It hadn't come through Rachel, it had come directly to the child. Rachel stood in the hallway for several seconds, the envelope still in her hand. The house was quiet. David had taken Lily to the park, an attempt to create some sense of normalcy in the middle of the unraveling storm. Rachel walked into the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single handwritten letter. It was dated from the week prior. Dear Lily. I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't know if your parents will think it's right for you to read something from someone who hasn't been there. But if you're holding this now, it means they've trusted you with a piece of your own story. And that matters more than anything else I could say. My name is Sarah. I'm the woman who gave birth to you. That's a strange thing to say, isn't it? A strange truth for a little girl who's probably wondering why a mother would ever walk away from her baby. I don't have all the perfect answers. But I promise I made the choice out of love, not because I didn't want you, but because I wasn't ready to give you the life you deserved. Your father, David, was scared but determined. When I told him about you, he didn't hesitate. He told me he would raise you, love you, and protect you. He told me he had someone in his life, a woman named Rachel, who had a heart big enough to love a child even if she didn't carry her in her belly. And I believed him. I believed in her, too. I believed in the idea that you would grow up surrounded by people who saw you not as a mistake, but as a miracle. I never stopped thinking about you. I followed your life from afar as best I could. I saw photos, sometimes, when they were shared through people we both once knew. I kept a journal for you, letters I wrote over the years that I never sent. Maybe one day you'll want to read them. Or maybe not. That will be your choice. Just like it was my choice to give you a different beginning. I heard what happened at your grandmother's party. And I cried. Not because I didn't expect it. I've always known Barbara Sanders was not a woman who forgave easily or loved freely, but because you didn't deserve it. You never did. You are not the product of shame. You are the product of courage, and kindness, and second chances. You were born into a moment of confusion, yes, but you grew into a world of people who made space for you, even when it was hard. Even when it was messy. And if that world ever feels like it's closing in again, if anyone ever makes you feel small or unwelcome, I want you to remember this: you were chosen. Twice. Once by me, when I said goodbye to give you the life I couldn't offer. And once by Rachel, who said yes to a daughter she hadn't planned for, but loved like her own. You belong exactly where you are. If one day you want to meet me, I will be waiting. I will be nervous. I will be overwhelmed. But I will never stop being grateful for the chance to see you smile. With love, always. Sarah. Rachel finished the letter and sat still for several minutes, unable to move. Her breath came in slow, shallow pulls. She held the paper gently, as if afraid it might dissolve in her hands. The words weren't manipulative or invasive. They weren't designed to insert Sarah back into Lily's life forcefully. They were simple, direct, and heartbreakingly human. When David and Lily returned from the park, Rachel met them at the door. David looked at her face and knew something had shifted. "There's a letter," Rachel said. "From Sarah. For Lily." His jaw tightened. "Did she send it directly?" Rachel nodded. "No return address. Just a note. And it's not what you're thinking. She's not demanding anything. She's not trying to claim her. She just told the truth." David looked down at Lily, who was tugging off her shoes, chatting about the squirrel she'd seen chase a butterfly. He nodded slowly. "We should let her read it. When she's ready." Rachel didn't reply. She simply placed the letter in the drawer beside the family albums and locked it. The next day, Rachel met with Andrea at her downtown office. The glass building buzzed with midweek energy, but Rachel's focus was singular. She handed Andrea the letters from Barbara, the ones David had found, and detailed her visit to the law firm. She also shared the copy of the new letter, not as evidence, but as context. Andrea reviewed everything in silence, her brows furrowed. "This is more than enough," she said finally. "We can file for declaratory relief, which means we ask the court to formally state that Lily's exclusion from the estate is discriminatory. If Barbara tries to counter it, we can file an injunction to freeze the estate assets while the case proceeds." Rachel nodded. "I don't care about the money. I care about the message. She can't keep treating Lily like a footnote." Andrea smiled softly. "That's exactly how we'll position it." Rachel exhaled. She didn't want courtrooms or hearings. But she wanted Barbara's cruelty documented, named, made real. So that Lily would never grow up believing she had been unwanted in silence. That evening, Barbara called. Rachel stared at the phone as it rang, the caller ID glowing in cold white letters. David stood nearby, eyes fixed on the screen. "Are you going to answer it?" he asked. Rachel let it ring once more. Then she picked up. "Rachel," Barbara said, her tone tight. "We need to talk." "We do," Rachel replied evenly. "But it won't be over the phone. I heard you went to my lawyer." "I did." Barbara exhaled sharply. "This is a private family matter. It doesn't need to become a public one. No, Rachel said. It stopped being private the moment you humiliated a child in front of her family. She's not my grandchild. Rachel's voice stayed calm. She's David's daughter. That makes her part of this family. Whether you accept it or not. Barbara paused. You're going to regret stirring this up. No, Rachel said. I'm going to make sure Lily never regrets being born. Then she hung up. David stared at her, speechless. She doesn't get to write the narrative anymore, Rachel said. We do. Later that night, Rachel pulled the letter from the drawer and sat on Lily's bed. Her daughter looked up, curious. I have something for you, Rachel said softly. It's from someone who wants you to know how loved you are. Lily took the letter with careful hands and opened it slowly. As her eyes moved across the page, her mouth parted. She didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. But when she finished, she folded the letter neatly, held it to her chest, and said, "She sounds like she misses me." Rachel nodded. She does. Lily looked up. Can I write her back? Rachel smiled. Whenever you're ready. And in that moment, something long buried began to heal, not with noise or victory, but with truth. When word of Rachel's consultations with lawyers and the existence of Barbara's letters spread quietly through the family, the reaction was immediate and fierce. A Sunday afternoon barbecue at David's sister Emma's home became ground zero for the mounting confrontation Rachel had both dreaded and expected. The heat of summer still hung in the air, mirroring the tension that crackled under polite conversation. Rachel, Lily, and David arrived a little later than the rest. Emma waved them over from the patio, where a long table was laden with ribs, macaroni salad, coleslaw, and watermelon slices. The smell of charcoal drifted through the yard. Kids ran in the lawn, older cousins sat in folding chairs, sipping iced tea. Barbara was already there, seated at the head of the table, wrapped in a pastel shawl, a stiff posture visible even from a distance. David cleared his throat and greeted Emma with a hug. Lily ran off with her cousins to the yard. Rachel set down a bowl of salad and smiled at a couple of relatives, but she felt watched, analyzed. She had the envelope from Sarah tucked in her purse, the letters from Barbara still folded and preserved. She came prepared. Barbara looked up as David approached. "David, dear, good to see you." She spoke with cool civility, her voice even. Rachel noted the faint tremor of irritation beneath it. "Hi, Mom," David said, placing a hand on her shoulder. He glanced at Rachel, seeking a sign. She squared her shoulders. Rachel sat beside Emma. Conversation ebbed and flowed around her, about work, about summer plans, about Lily's upcoming birthday. But the undercurrent was unmistakable. Eyes flicked toward Rachel. Whispers passed in side glances. A distant cousin murmured something, laughter followed, but Rachel caught her name in it: inheritance, disgrace, legal battle. At a lull before dessert, Barbara stood. The cousins paused mid-fork. "I'd like to say something," she announced. Her voice cut through the murmurs. Rachel's heart pounded. She didn't rise. David's hand found hers under the table. He squeezed gently, a silent promise. Barbara cleared her throat, looking first at David, then at Rachel. This family has always held certain standards. Honesty, respect, lineage. I uphold these values not out of malice, but out of tradition. The bond between blood, between named heirs, must be preserved. A cousin's eyebrows raised. Emma shifted in her chair. Rachel spoke before she could think. "Lineage doesn't make someone any less real," she said, her voice louder than she'd intended. Heads turned fully to her. Lily, sitting on Emma's lap, watched Rachel closely, oblivious to the legal weight of what was being said, but aware of something heavy in her mother's tone. Barbara looked at Lily. Her eyes lingered. Rachel saw the recognition, or the conflict, cross Barbara's features. "I didn't say your granddaughter wasn't yours," Barbara said softly. "I said she's not really part of our family in terms of inheritance." David rose, his face flushed but composed. "You publicly humiliated our daughter," he said. "But I love her. I want her to have the same respect anyone gets in this family, no less." Barbara's lips thinned. "Respect is earned," she said sharply. "You and Rachel have chosen to bring certain elements of your past into our family in ways I never consented to." Relative voices murmured at this. Emma's cheeks tinged pink. Rachel drew in a breath, fighting to stay grounded. "I have asked nothing but the truth to be heard," Rachel said, standing up. "I have documents. Letters. Written by you. Directed at Lily. Excluding her not just emotionally, but legally. Do you deny writing them?" Barbara paused, glancing around. A few family members shifted uncomfortably. A cousin named Mark cleared his throat. "Are you serious, Barbara?" Barbara lifted her chin. "I will not discuss private letters in front of relatives." Then she turned toward David. "Maybe you should handle this with discretion." Lily, too young to follow all the subtleties, tugged Rachel's arm. "Mama, is this Grandma being mean again?" Rachel knelt beside her. "No, baby," she said softly. "Just telling the truth." Barbara's color rose. "If you choose to broadcast my private conversations," she said, voice edged with cold, "you should know there are consequences." Andrew, the eldest grandchild, spoke up. He had remained quietly observant until now. "If Grandma is so worried about consequences, maybe she should have thought of them before she wrote the letters," he said, voice steady. All heads turned to him. Rachel felt a surge of relief. Support. Andrew folded his arms. "I'm tired of thinking Lily is less. I'll stand with her." David's eyes glistened. Emma put an arm around Lily. Other siblings exchanged glances. A quiet solidarity began to build. A cousin's husband nudged him, wives swirled around talking to each other, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief to support for Rachel and Lily. Barbara's face paled. She opened her mouth, perhaps to speak, but no words came. Her jaw clenched, then she turned and sat back down, pulling her shawl tighter around her. Silence stretched over the table. A soft breeze rustled the napkins. Lily hugged Rachel's leg. Rachel wrapped an arm around her daughter. David stood nearby, watching Barbara, torn between anger and sorrow. Finally, Rachel took a deep breath. "I didn't want this," she said. "I didn't want a courtroom here, or family torn apart. But truth is louder than shame." Barbara looked up. Her eyes were stony, her hands clasped over her lap. "Once this is in the open, you cannot control how it ends," she said, voice cold. Rachel stood tall. "Then let it end with truth." Andrew stood, placing his hand gently on Lily's shoulder. Emma joined him. Others shifted forward. Rachel saw faces she hadn't noticed before, cousins, aunts, uncles, some nodding, some looking away, some taking in Rachel's expression as though seeing her clearly for the first time. Barbara's voice broke the hush. "If you wish to challenge me legally, then do it. But you'll find your grandmother isn't the first obstacle. The story people believe may not be the whole story." Rachel held David's hand, turned to face the family. "Then let's uncover the whole story." The gathering ended soon after. Barbara left the table abruptly. Emma helped Lily gather her shoes. David walked with Rachel to their car in silence, but this time certain, the tide was shifting. That night, Rachel sat at the kitchen table again, letters spread before her. The family had witnessed Barbara's letter. They'd seen Andrew support Lily. It meant more than legal filings ever could. But Rachel knew what came next. Barbara would retaliate. Maybe in court. Maybe in smaller, more insidious ways. But the groundwork had been laid. Lily's laughter echoed from the living room where she was playing with cousins via video chat. Rachel listened, letting that sound anchor her. She turned to David. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Thank you for not letting it go." Rachel pressed her hand over Lily's bedroom door. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We move forward." And with that promise, she felt something new, a trembling hope, strong enough to face anything. Rachel drove in silence, her hands steady on the wheel, her mind running far ahead of the winding back roads of rural Connecticut. The GPS said she was close, but she didn't need the voice prompts. Sarah's new address, sent after Lily's letter had been received and answered, was etched in Rachel's mind. They had agreed to meet again, not in a cafe this time, but at Sarah's home. Rachel had requested it. She needed to see where Sarah had gone after walking away from everything. She needed to know what had shaped the woman who once gave birth to the little girl now asleep in her home, unaware of the history unfolding around her. Sarah's house was modest, a single-story colonial with a sagging porch and ivy growing around the frame. A bicycle leaned against the side, half covered by a tarp. A swing creaked in the front yard, moving slowly in the wind. Rachel parked at the curb, stepped out, and took a long breath before walking to the door. Sarah opened it before Rachel could knock. She looked more rested this time, more centered. She wore jeans, a soft gray cardigan, and no makeup. Her eyes, though tired, held a quiet clarity. "You came," Sarah said. "I said I would," Rachel replied. They stood in silence for a moment, then Sarah stepped aside. "Come in." The interior of the house was humble, clean but worn, lived in. A stack of children's books lay beside the couch. Rachel glanced at the framed photos on the shelf, a man and Sarah, smiling at a park, a toddler with curly black hair stacking blocks, another baby, still in diapers, asleep in a bassinet. "You have two now?" Rachel asked, nodding toward the photo. Sarah smiled faintly. "Yes. A boy and a girl. Evan and Zoe." Rachel didn't comment further. She sat on the couch while Sarah brought 2 cups of tea. They sat for a long time without speaking. Then Rachel pulled the letter from her bag, the one Sarah had written to Lily. She read it, Rachel said. Sarah's eyes searched hers. "And?" "She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She said you sounded like you missed her." Then she asked if she could write back. Sarah looked down at her hands, breathing deeply. "She said something else," Rachel continued. "She said, she sounds like she wants to know me." Sarah swallowed hard. "I do." Rachel set the letter down. "But she's still a child. And her life is complicated enough. I don't know what this means for the future, but I came because I need answers." Sarah nodded. "Ask anything." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Why did you really leave?" "Not just because you were scared. That part one understand. But why did you give her up so completely? Not a birthday card. Not a photo. Not a single attempt until now." Sarah sat back, her eyes distant. "I was 23 when I gave birth. My mother had just died. I had no savings. No family. David was kind, but I knew his family hated the idea of me. And then Barbara showed up." Rachel leaned forward. "She really offered you money?" "She did," Sarah said. "But it wasn't about the money. It was how she said it. Like Lily was a stain. She didn't call her a baby. She called her a complication. A setback. She said, if you love your daughter, you'll let her go. You'll let my son raise her the right way." Rachel's jaw tightened. "She promised me Lily would have everything. That if I stepped away, there would be no confusion. David said you were back in his life, and that you loved kids. He believed you'd love her. So I did what I thought was best." Rachel's voice came out quiet. "You believed the lie." Sarah nodded. "I believed Barbara would fade. That her power would stop at the surface. But I was wrong." Rachel shifted slightly, her tone more cautious now. "Did you ever think about coming back? Changing your mind?" "Every year," Sarah said. "Every single birthday, I almost sent a card. but I didn't want to complicate Lily's life. I didn't want to pull her into mine just to relieve my own guilt. Rachel studied her. There was no deceit in Sarah's words. Only the kind of pain that had been left to calcify over time. I want to protect her, Rachel said. But I also want her to know the whole story. And that might mean knowing you. Sarah looked down. I'm willing to take this one step at a time. But only if she wants it. Rachel nodded. She will. She's strong. And curious. But she's been hurt. I know, Sarah said quietly. And I take responsibility for that. They sat for a while, sipping tea, talking about neutral things, Lily's favorite books, the way she chews her nails when she's nervous, the way she draws tiny suns in the margins of every notebook page. Rachel spoke with the ease of a mother who knew every quirk, every habit. Sarah listened, absorbing each word like a balm. When Rachel finally stood to leave, Sarah followed her to the door. I have one question for you, Rachel said, her hand on the knob. If Barbara hadn't interfered, would you have stayed? Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes. I would have tried. Rachel nodded once, then left. Back home, Rachel found Lily coloring at the kitchen table. David was making dinner, apron on, music playing softly. The air felt lighter than it had in weeks. Mom, Lily said, looking up. I want to write another letter. Rachel kissed the top of her head. We can do that after dinner. Later that evening, Lily sat with her notepad, her small hand carefully shaping each letter. Dear Sarah. Thank you for the letter. I showed it to my bunny. He can't read, but I think he liked it. She paused, then looked up. Can I ask her what my first word was? Rachel smiled gently. You can ask her anything. Lily nodded and kept writing. Upstairs, in the attic, David was organizing old storage boxes when he found another manila envelope. This one was marked in Barbara's handwriting, private, for executor only. He stared at it for a moment, then brought it down. Rachel opened it with him at the dining table. Inside were typed instructions for Barbara's funeral, her estate, and an amended trust clause, not yet filed, but signed. It included a posthumous statement: under no circumstances shall Lily Sanders be named or honored in any public family documentation. This is to preserve the dignity of the Sanders name. David stared in silence. She planned this all the way to her grave. Rachel folded the paper slowly. Then we fight her from it. Even now. Because this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a battle for a child's identity, her right to exist without apology, without shame. And Rachel wasn't about to lose. The letter from Barbara's private file sat open on the table between Rachel and David, the weight of its final sentence pressing down like a boulder. Under no circumstances shall Lily Sanders be named or honored in any public family documentation. This is to preserve the dignity of the Sanders name. The phrasing was clinical, legal, but its implications were deeply personal, an attempt to erase a child, even in death. Rachel had seen a lot of cruelty in Barbara's behavior, but this was the first time it felt like something out of a Cold War playbook. A legacy of silence. A will that screamed rejection without ever speaking aloud. David paced the room, unable to sit. She wrote this like she was planning a political campaign, he said, his voice hard. Like Lily is some PR risk to be buried along with her estate. Rachel stared at the document. This isn't just exclusion. It's erasure. She wanted her name redacted from her own bloodline. She doesn't even see her as blood. Then it's time we force her to. The very next morning, Rachel walked into Andrea's office with a folder in one hand and fire in her chest. She laid out the new evidence, the letter, the trust clause, and the funeral instructions with calculated calm. Andrea read silently, eyes narrowing as she reached the final paragraph. She included this in a posthumous directive? Andrea asked. Rachel nodded. She wanted her entire legacy to exclude my daughter's existence. Andrea sat back in her chair. We now have grounds to file on at least 3 fronts: posthumous defamation, inheritance discrimination, and, most importantly, legal name disqualification. If Barbara attempts to remove Lily's surname retroactively, or disqualify her from any mention in legal family records, we can file an emergency injunction. Rachel's voice was steady. Do it. Andrea scribbled notes quickly. I'm going to need David to sign affidavits. And we'll need to file this at the county level first, then push it up to probate court. I'll bring him tomorrow, Rachel said. Over the following week, events escalated fast. Word spread that Rachel had filed legal documents. Barbara, as predicted, struck back immediately. Her lawyers submitted a counter-request to officially exclude Lily from the Sanders family trust on the grounds that her lineage does not conform to the documented bloodline required by original estate conditions. David, incensed, marched into the probate court alongside Rachel and Andrea and filed a statement of opposition. It was the first time he had publicly spoken about Lily's origins. In the courtroom, under oath, he said clearly and without pause, "Lily is my daughter. I have raised her, loved her, protected her. The circumstances of her birth are not a valid reason to strip her of her name or her family." Barbara was not in the courtroom that day, but her legal team was. They sat stone-faced, passing notes silently as the hearing progressed. The judge scheduled a formal hearing in 2 weeks. But Barbara wasn't done. That weekend, an anonymous article appeared in the local paper, an op-ed questioning the moral fitness of inheritance in the absence of clear biological lineage. Though it didn't name Rachel or Lily directly, it quoted phrases from Barbara's letters nearly word for word. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Rachel stood in her kitchen holding the paper, her mouth tight. "She's trying to shape the narrative," she said. "She wants the public to think this is about integrity." David took the article from her. "It's cowardice disguised as tradition." Rachel's phone buzzed. Andrea had already read the op-ed. "We need to go public," she said. "Not through gossip. Not through leaks. But through testimony. We'll have a media day after the first hearing. If you're willing." Rachel hesitated. "I don't want to drag Lily into the spotlight." "We won't. We'll speak as parents. You'll speak as her advocate. And we'll speak the truth." Rachel agreed. The following Monday, as court documents began circulating and local reporters started sniffing around, something unexpected happened. Rachel received a call from Andrew. "I need to talk to you," he said. They met at a local diner. Andrew brought a thick binder with him and set it on the table without a word. Rachel opened it. Inside were scanned copies of Barbara's personal correspondence with estate managers, not just regarding Lily, but about several other family members. The letters detailed manipulations, cuts, even fabricated moral failings used to justify disinheriting cousins, in-laws, and even her late husband's niece. "She did this to others," Andrew said. "It wasn't just Lily. It was whoever didn't fit." Rachel flipped through the pages, her stomach turning. "How did you get this?" "I work in estate consulting," he said. "I pulled some strings." She never expected someone from the inside to look into her documents. Rachel closed the binder. "You're testifying, aren't you?" "I will," he said. "She's hurt too many people. This isn't about money anymore. It's about what kind of family we allow ourselves to be." On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. David's sisters sat together, tense and quiet. A few cousins Rachel barely knew sat behind them. Reporters waited outside, notebooks in hand. The judge reviewed the filings, then opened the floor. Andrea spoke first, laying out the timeline. The exclusion. The documents. The deliberate attempt to write Lily out of existence, not just from the will, but from the Sanders family history. Then David stood. His voice was calm but unwavering. Families are not built on paperwork. They are built on love, on presence, on commitment. I've been Lily's father since the day she came into this world. My mother may not have wanted her. But I did. And I still do. Then Rachel took the stand. She didn't read from notes. She simply looked at the judge and said what she knew. This is not about inheritance. It's not about money. It's about a child who is being told by the people around her that she does not belong. And we are here to say she does. Andrea submitted Andrew's binder into evidence. The judge reviewed it, frowning. Then Andrew testified, revealing a pattern of systemic exclusion orchestrated by Barbara for decades. The courtroom grew still as he read excerpts. Barbara's team requested a delay, but the judge denied it. I will review the full scope of these materials, she said, but this court recognizes that family is defined by more than biology. An exclusion based on the circumstances of birth, particularly of a minor, is not an acceptable foundation for any legal trust. The hearing adjourned. Outside, reporters swarmed. Rachel gave a short statement, emphasizing the value of truth, family, and protection of the voiceless. She didn't say Lily's name once. At home that night, Lily was asleep, a stuffed bunny under her chin. Rachel sat beside her, watching the slow rhythm of her breathing. David entered the room and knelt beside them. She's going to be okay, he said. She already is, Rachel replied. But deep down, they both knew, Barbara wasn't finished. Barbara Sanders had always believed in control. Not just of her finances or her social image, but of her family, how they behaved, who they married, how they raised their children. Even in silence, she wielded power through implication. She never had to raise her voice. A glance, a well-placed phrase, a withheld invitation, these were her tools. But now, for the first time, her influence was slipping. And she wasn't going to let that happen without using every last ounce of leverage she had left. 1 week after the court hearing, Rachel received a registered letter at the house. It was addressed to her directly, not to David, not to the family, just her. Inside was a formal document, issued through a private legal firm in New York City. The letter outlined the terms of a revised codicil to Barbara's estate. Attached was an updated clause confirming what had already been discussed in court, the explicit and permanent exclusion of Lily Sanders from all inheritance claims, including not just financial assets, but symbolic family heirlooms, photo albums, and even burial proximity. Burial proximity. Rachel reread the line 3 times, stunned. Barbara had specified that when her time came, she was to be buried in the Sanders family plot, a private section within a gated cemetery, and that Lily was not to be listed on any plaque, memorial, or stone in the family enclosure. A directive had even been sent to the cemetery management. She placed the paper on the table and sat back in disbelief. David entered moments later, holding a mug of tea. He saw her expression and stopped. What now? Rachel slid the document across the table. David scanned it, his hands tightening around the mug. Burial exclusion, he muttered. She's trying to erase Lily from beyond the grave. She's terrified of losing her version of the story, Rachel said. Even if she has to write the ending herself. David put the mug down. We can challenge this too. We will. But it's not about winning in court anymore, Rachel said. This is about reclaiming space. Memory. Name. That evening, Rachel called Andrea again. The lawyer wasn't surprised. I've seen this before, Andrea said. When people feel their legacy slipping, they double down. Especially matriarchs. She thinks death will preserve her control. And can it? Rachel asked. Legally? In some ways, yes, Andrea admitted. She can't stop you from living your truth. But she can make every effort to stop the world from acknowledging it. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Then we need to prepare. Because this won't stop until she's gone. And even then, we'll still be cleaning up the mess she left behind. The days passed slowly. Rumors continued to ripple through the extended family. Some distant cousins withdrew from Rachel and David entirely. Others reached out privately to offer words of quiet support but refused to do so publicly. Only Andrew remained vocal, attending a second hearing with a newly compiled file, Barbara's unpublished memoir notes. She had been working on it for over a decade, Andrew explained. It's full of subtle digs at Lily. She never says her name. She refers to her as the shadow in the family line. It's deliberate. And ugly. Rachel flipped through the manuscript, her stomach churning. Barbara's writing was polished, emotionally distant, and unmistakably elitist. She spoke of legacy, purity, honor, all while pretending Lily didn't exist. Or worse, that she had been some regrettable deviation. The following Sunday, Rachel and David hosted a small dinner at their home. Only a handful of family members came: Emma, Andrew, two cousins from David's father's side, and a neighbor who had become like an aunt to Lily. They gathered not just to show support but to plan. "We need to think about the funeral," Rachel said. "Because she's going to pass one day. And when that happens, we need to decide what we're going to let that moment mean." David looked at his sister. "Mom has already planned every detail. The service. The headstone. The guest list. And Lily's name is absent from all of it." Emma shook her head. "I can't keep pretending she didn't go too far. I know she's our mother, but this is wrong." Andrew looked at Rachel. "What do you want to do?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. "I want Lily to know that her presence matters. That no one, not even a grandmother, has the right to write her out of history." Andrew nodded. "Then we'll create something of our own." "What do you mean?" David asked. "A counter-memorial," Andrew said. "Separate from the official Sanders plot. A space where we tell the real story. We document the truth. We preserve it." Rachel blinked, surprised. "You'd help with that?" Andrew nodded. "I'll fund it. And I'll design it. I want her to grow up knowing she was defended." Tears stung Rachel's eyes. She reached out and touched his hand. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, they began the quiet planning of their own legacy. Rachel compiled letters, photographs, journal entries, drawings Lily had made. Andrew found a location in a local historical park that allowed for private memorial installations, and he began working with an artist on the design. The idea wasn't to vilify Barbara. It wasn't even to mention her. The idea was to tell Lily's story, truthfully, beautifully, and publicly. Meanwhile, Andrea filed one final document with the court, a declaration of identity, signed by both Rachel and David, affirming Lily's rightful place in the Sanders lineage, not through blood, but through lived experience, legal recognition, and irrevocable love. Barbara's lawyers filed objections. But the court did not agree. The judge ruled that while Barbara could exclude Lily from financial inheritance, she could not alter state records to remove familial ties. Nor could she prevent David and Rachel from identifying her as part of their legal family in public memorials or history. The ruling was quiet, procedural, but it was everything Rachel needed. A month later, Rachel and David brought Lily to the site Andrew had helped establish. It was a stone garden, modest but beautiful, with a small plaque nestled into a curved bench under a tree. The plaque read, "Lily Sanders, loved fiercely. Chosen freely. A daughter of truth." Lily ran her fingers over the engraving. "That's me." Rachel smiled. "It always will be." David knelt beside her. "Do you like it?" Lily nodded. "It's nice. It doesn't leave anyone out." Rachel and David exchanged a look. And for the first time since this all began, Rachel felt peace settle around them like a soft blanket, not because the war was over, but because they had claimed the only victory that mattered. They had told the truth. The seasons shifted. What had begun in summer now faded into fall. Connecticut's trees burned crimson and gold along quiet streets, and the air turned crisp, alive with change. Rachel stood in the school parking lot waiting for Lily, watching as other parents greeted their children with backpacks bouncing and voices full of chatter. She spotted Lily emerging from the front steps, her cheeks flushed from recess, her little hand raised in a wave. Rachel smiled, but it wasn't just the small, habitual smile of a mother at pickup. It was deeper now, filled with the quiet recognition of how far they'd come, and how much they had weathered. Lily, unaware of the legal motions and whispered gossip swirling through the adult world, had remained steady, bright, grounded by the simple things, her books, her art, her questions about everything from clouds to why adults cry when no one's looking. When they got home, Rachel found a letter in the mailbox. The handwriting was unfamiliar, firm, practiced, deliberate. She opened it cautiously and immediately recognized the contents. Barbara had written it. The letter was dated 3 days prior. Not sent through lawyers. Not filtered through assistants. Just a handwritten page on thick stationery, scented faintly with something floral and expensive. Rachel read it once in the entryway, then again at the kitchen table after sending Lily upstairs to change. Rachel, I have watched what you've done. I've seen the public statements, the courtroom testimony, the memorial. You've made your position very clear. And yet, something in me believes you're not doing this out of spite, but out of fear. You fear that if Lily is not seen, she will disappear. You fear that if others don't name her, she will become invisible. But I ask you, is visibility the same as belonging? Or is it merely performance? You will win your legal acknowledgments. That much is clear. But names can be carved in stone without being carried in hearts. I will not revise my estate. I will not add her name. That is my final decision. I say this not to wound, but to close the matter. May peace find you. Barbara. Rachel sat still for a long moment, her hands gripping the letter so tightly the paper began to bend. She didn't cry. She didn't throw it away. She folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer marked Evidence, along with the others. She had expected as much. Later that evening, David joined her on the porch after Lily had gone to bed. He was quiet, his face tired. He'd been quiet all week, since the final hearing. They sat in silence for a while, watching the breeze push leaves across the lawn. She sent me a letter, Rachel finally said. David turned his head slightly. Barbara? Rachel nodded. It wasn't an apology. It was closure. In her mind, at least. David rubbed the back of his neck. She's not going to change. I know, Rachel said. But I don't need her to anymore. There was a pause before David spoke again. She's sick. Rachel blinked. What? She's been sick for months. She didn't tell anyone outside her legal team. I found out through a family friend. Pancreatic cancer. Late stage. Rachel didn't move. And she still spent her energy trying to control everything. She probably thinks she's protecting the family legacy. Or what's left of it. Rachel exhaled. She's trying to outlive her own death. That's what this has always been about. She asked to see me, David said. Just me. Rachel turned toward him. Will you go? I don't know, he admitted. But if I do, I won't go silently. Rachel nodded. Then tell her the truth. All of it. Not for her sake, but for yours. A week later, David stood at the door of Barbara's estate, the same one where Lily had been denied her gift, where Rachel had been humiliated, where silence had reigned for years. The nurse let him in. The house smelled of lemon polish and sterile ointments. Barbara sat in a reclining chair by the fireplace, thinner now, draped in a cashmere blanket. You came, she said. David nodded. Not for you. For me. She gave a small, bitter smile. Still defiant. No, he said. Just honest. She looked at him for a long time. You think I'm a villain? I think you're afraid, he said. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of what people will think if the perfect image you built starts to crack. I protected this family, she said quietly. No, he replied. You protected a myth. And in doing so, you hurt a child who only ever wanted to belong. Barbara's eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. You don't understand what it means to build a name. To preserve it. Your father did. His name meant something. And what will it mean now? David asked. That it was built on exclusions? On shame? Or that his grandson stood up and said, "This ends with me"? She said nothing. David stepped closer. I'm not here to make you change your will. I'm not here to beg. I'm just here to say that your legacy is not what's written on paper. It's what people remember. And Lily will remember that her grandmother never spoke her name. Barbara flinched, just slightly. David turned to go, but paused. You still have time to change that. But I'm done asking. He left without another word. At home, Rachel was reading Lily a bedtime story when he returned. Lily ran to him, hugged his leg. He lifted her into his arms and held her longer than usual. Later, in bed, he told Rachel everything. I don't think she'll change, he said. She doesn't have to, Rachel whispered. Because we did. That week, the local paper ran a follow-up column. It wasn't about the case, or the hearing. It was about the memorial, the one Andrew had helped build. The article featured a photo of the stone bench beneath the tree. The plaque. The story of a family reclaiming truth. There was no mention of Barbara. No rebuttal. No scandal. Just a headline that read, in her name, "One family stand against silence." Lily clipped the article and placed it in her scrapbook. Someday, she said to Rachel, I want to be someone who helps kids know they matter. Rachel kissed her forehead. You already are. Barbara Sanders passed away on a Tuesday morning in late October, just as the first frost settled over Connecticut's lawns and rooftops. The call came just after sunrise. David stood in the hallway outside the bedroom, phone pressed to his ear, his body rigid. Rachel watched him from the kitchen, already knowing. She saw it in the way his shoulders didn't move. The stillness of the moment gave it away before he ever spoke a word. He didn't cry. Neither did Rachel. There was a strange calm that followed, not the peace that came with closure, but the silence that falls when the storm you've lived through finally ends. The funeral was scheduled for that Friday. A private service, according to Barbara's request. Limited attendance. No children. Rachel didn't argue. Neither did David. They chose not to bring Lily. Instead, Rachel spent that morning with her daughter in the garden behind the house, helping her paint a small wooden box she had been working on for days. Inside the box, Lily placed 3 things: a drawing of herself and David holding hands, a small daisy she had picked that morning, and a note written in crayon that read, "Even when people don't see you, you still shine." When Rachel asked what it was for, Lily said, "It's for when we say goodbye to people who didn't really say hello." At the cemetery, the mood was subdued but tense. Rachel stayed at the back. David stood near the casket, silent, not as a son in mourning, but as a man fulfilling an obligation. The officiant read a short, impersonal eulogy. No one mentioned Lily. No one mentioned the case. No one spoke of what had torn the family in two. But everyone felt it. The omission echoed louder than the words that were said. Emma approached Rachel after the ceremony. Her eyes were red, but not from grief. She could have made this right, Emma said. Rachel nodded. She chose not to. Emma swallowed hard. But you did. All of you did. In the days that followed, David began the process of settling his mother's affairs. He worked closely with Andrea and the court executor, ensuring that the exclusion clauses would be noted, but not honored beyond what was already legal. Barbara's personal assets, including her heirlooms and documents, were divided according to her final will. Lily's name was absent from all of it, as expected. But something unexpected arrived 2 weeks later. A package. Hand-delivered. No return address. Rachel opened it in the living room. Inside was a velvet pouch, a notarized letter, and a sealed envelope. The pouch contained the Sanders family necklace, the one Barbara had insisted would go to Emma's daughter, Emma having later declined it in quiet protest. The letter was from Barbara's personal attorney, stating that a final instruction had been added just days before her death. The envelope was addressed, in Barbara's handwriting, to Lily. Rachel hesitated before opening it. She and David read it together. Lily, I do not know if these words will reach you, or if you'll care to read them when they do. I have done things in my life that I justified as protection. For the name. For the family. For what I believed was order. But you, child, have reminded me that order means nothing without love. That silence is not safety. It is erasure. And though I may never have said it to your face, I have seen your courage. Your strength. Your grace. You are not the weakness in this family. You are its reckoning. And in that, its future. This necklace was worn by my grandmother, and then by mine. I had chosen another for it. But I see now that it belongs to the one who bore the greatest weight with the quietest heart. Do not forgive me quickly. I have not earned it. But wear this not as a token of my approval, wear it as proof that even the most stubborn stories can change their endings. Barbara. Rachel folded the letter slowly. She didn't cry. But David did. They placed the necklace in Lily's hands that evening. She looked at it, then at her parents. Is this mine now? Yes, Rachel said. If you want it. Lily thought for a moment. Then she smiled. Can I wear it for my birthday? Rachel kissed her cheek. You can wear it whenever you want. A week later, they hosted Lily's 8th birthday at home. It wasn't extravagant, just a backyard party with close friends, cake, games, and laughter. But it was different this year. There was something full and bright about it, something solid beneath the surface. Every person there was someone who had chosen to be there. No performance. No pretending. Lily opened her gifts with enthusiasm, but the most touching moment came when she stood on the small wooden step stool and held up the necklace for everyone to see. This was my great-great-grandma's, she said proudly. It means I'm part of a story. David, standing beside Rachel, squeezed her hand. You are the story, Rachel whispered. In the months that followed, Rachel and Sarah continued their quiet correspondence. Letters back and forth. Drawings. Questions. Lily asked to meet Sarah in person, and they did, over cocoa at a quiet cafe. There were no tears. Just warmth. Familiarity. Space. Rachel watched from a distance, not as a threatened mother, but as a protector giving her daughter what had been withheld for too long, the whole picture. David continued his relationship with his siblings, most of whom had finally seen the truth for what it was. They didn't undo all the damage Barbara had done. But they stopped pretending. And Lily thrived. At school, she wrote an essay titled, What It Means to Be Seen. In it, she wrote, sometimes people look at you and still don't see you. But when someone tells your story, when they say your name, when they choose you, then it's like your light gets bigger. And then you can help other people see too. Rachel read it in the car that day. She sat behind the steering wheel, letter in hand, heart full. No court ruling, no heirloom, no apology could ever compare to the truth her daughter had grown into. And that was the real legacy. Not the money. Not the name. But the courage to speak. The power to choose. And the quiet, unwavering strength of a little girl who refused to disappear.